show was good. Definitely good guy. Very great to talk music and wrestling with. With that being said, we're going to bring in the next man of the hour. This man is a Hall of Famer of WWE in 2010. This man is a true wrestling legend. Definitely has a lot of stories to tell. Also, definitely is a brother in Christ. Definitely loves his life and how he lives it. Of course, you've seen his son wrestle in WWE, Ted DiBiase Jr. And we're going to bring in right now, live, the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase. Welcome.
Hi, how you guys doing?
Hey, man, how you doing, bro?
Hey, how's it going?
We're good. We're good, man.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
How you feeling today?
I feel pretty good for an old man.
We don't want to call you old. We wouldn't do that to you. Not at all. Not at all. So it's a pleasure to have you on, sir. On here, just want to ask if what you would like for us to call you, Mr. DiBiase, $1 Million Man, Mr. Ted.
Nah, just call me Ted.
Just Ted, okay. Right. You don't want to have no $1 Million dreams and no fish straps on us at all. We not. Want to start it off. First and foremost, locally, of course, we here in Baltimore. Promotion we have here is Maryland Championship Wrestling, and I know you'll be making an appearance here this coming weekend, so I want to give you your time to talk about that.
Well, I'm going to be flying in there. Actually, I'm going to fly in on Saturday for the appearance, and I guess it's Maryland Championship Wrestling. I believe Jake Roberts is on the card as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll be making an appearance. I believe it's in Joppa, Maryland, and I'm not sure what time it gets started. I just know I'm going to get on a plane and I'm going to get there. I'll find out the rest when I hit the ground, just like the old school,
That's good.
No problem with that.
Thank you for that. Speaking of old school, a good buddy of ours, we've interviewed him before. Of course, you mentioned the great Jake the Snake Roberts. If you don't mind, when you think of Jake Roberts, talk about him and your memories of working with him throughout the years.
Jake's one of the guys. I mean, I loved working with Jake. Jake was really good. I mean, Jake had a great psychology of the business and understanding of it, which made working with him easy because people will ask you what's the hardest match you ever had or toughest match, and when you understand what wrestling is, it's sports entertainment, so there is no real struggle, there's no real contest. It's a show. So the struggle would be when you're in the ring with somebody that you have to guide step by step. So and the thing with Jake was he just understood the business so well, so it made my job even easier. And so when we wrestled together, I mean, we call it doing the dance. We danced well together. Sometimes it was sometimes just the way you position yourself, the other guy knows what you want to do. So we probably, people say, well, what was your favorite WrestleMania match? And I said, well, the first one I had was the first, WrestleMania for me was 4. The last match was Randy Savage, and that was a match that I really enjoyed, obviously. But my favorite match was 2 years later, WrestleMania 6 in Canada, Toronto, and I wrestled Jake. We just gelled so well together. And again, the other thing about Jake, that I'm very proud of Jake. I mean, a lot of people, including me, thought that Jake would be dead by now because of all of the the personal problems and the drug abuse that he went through, but the guy has just actually absolutely made a phenomenal turnaround in his life and is doing well now. So my hat's off to my friend.
Thank you.
That's wonderful.
It is. We got the pleasure to interview Jake and hang out with Jake backstage and talk. Very funny guy, very straightforward. Definitely has, like you said, very memorable voice, very strong. Actually threw one of the snakes on me backstage. So just random. Because how Jake is. If he likes you, he's gonna pick with you. If you don't, he'll just look at you and keep on going.
That's right.
If you don't mind taking a call, Ted, we got a fan from Texas, big fan of yours, Nick. He wanted to ask you a question.
Sure.
All right, Nick from Texas. Welcome to Under the Mat Radio with Ted DiBiase.
Thank you. Thanks for taking my call, Mr. DiBiase. Just wanted to know, are you still in possession of the $1 million belt?
Well, the actual belt, the real belt that the company made, is their property, and people, that's not just another belt. Vince does everything in a big way, and the actual belt that they had made for me, which was in 1988. In '88, its estimated value was $40,000. All the stones in the belt are cubic zirconium, which I guess means they're almost diamonds, and 700 stones at $50 a piece. There's $30,000 right there, and so I had to carry a declaration page when I would go into foreign countries with it, in case customs wanted to know. And so somebody recently said that today it would be valued at about $200,000. So I don't have it, but I always carry a replica of the belt, and the replica belts are very good. I mean, they're they look like they're the same weight, and they have the same feel. I think the only difference would be that if you put a replica up next to the actual belt, I think the stones in the actual belt are smaller.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's their it's their belt, and I guess the next time you'll see it is if they ever have an actual Hall of Fame.
Wow.
Yes.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Nick from
Thank
Texas.
you.
Thanks again.
Sure. Thank you, gentlemen.
Speaking of the belt, Ted, I'm gonna ask you this before I turn it to my co-host. When you think of your career in WWF back then as the $1 Million Man, what's the first thing that pops into your mind?
Oh gosh, that's just crazy. There's so many. I don't know the first thing that would pop into my mind, but I'm often asked, who did you enjoy working with? Well, I enjoyed working with Hogan. Number one, that's who I made the most money with, and that always makes the match better, right?
Right.
And in reality, Hulk was, people discredit him. They say, well, he really wasn't a great wrestler. What he was very good at was knowing his gimmick and working his gimmick properly. And the other thing that he really could wrestle if he wanted to, but again, to wrestle, to be Hulk Hogan, this bigger than life guy, those humongous muscles. He's not a guy that's supposed to be doing leg dives and all these different holds. It's kind of like I saw the Big Show throw a drop kick one time, and I asked him, why did you do that? And I guess he wanted to do it so he could show people that he could. I said, but you know what? We'll go back and watch Andre the Giant work. Andre knew how to work the Giant gimmick, and I said, when you're that big, you should never leave your feet. I mean, there's no reason for you to do things like that. So Hogan, if you watched Hogan actually when his match with the Warrior. When he put the Warrior over for the championship at WrestleMania 6, it's the best match I ever saw the Warrior ever have. And that's because Hulk let him through it, because that's the only way that Warrior could have a good match. So I think Hulk gets discredited sometimes, but I loved working with Hulk. Obviously Jake, Bret Hart. I had great matches with Bret. Bret and I, came from the same school of, so to speak, both of our dads, and we had some pretty good matches together. So those are some of the guys that I really enjoyed working with.
Thank you for that. NSC Gameboy?
Well, Ted, first of all, me, NSC Gameboy, I want to thank you for coming on Under the Mat Radio. I know you're a busy man, and we want to make your time here as great as possible. My question to you is a little personal, so bear with me on this. I know that you're a pastor now and a firm Christian, correct?
Oh, yep. I'm not a pastor, but I mean, I'm an ordained minister. But
okay, I apologize.
I don't. Yeah, that's okay. I don't pastor a church, though. I guess my calling is evangelism, so I travel and I speak in places all over all over the world, really.
Well, my question to you is, being a minister and looking back at your days in the wrestling business with all the vices of drugs and drinking and partying and stuff, and of course it has gotten a lot better, because of the wellness policies, and the business itself has just changed. But looking back on that, what would be some advice that you think you would tell your former self? Something that you would wish you could just kind of pull to the side and say, hey, Ted, and just give some words of, I guess, an encouragement or direction.
Well, I would probably tell the old Ted what I told my son Ted, when he told me he wanted to be a wrestler, and I encouraged him because my boys know my story. And I said, learn from my mistakes. The business, is a hard business, and whether it's wrestling or whether it's, whether you're a singer, if you're in the entertainment business, you're an actor, whether or an athlete, fame. If you're famous, when you're famous, you don't have to look for trouble. It'll come looking for you, and so. If you're a believer, then you need to guard yourself. You need to make yourself accountable. Have people that you know and trust that you can lean on, who can keep you in check. In other words, that you can be accountable to. And when I was in the height of my fame, the WWF had become we were like rock stars. We were traveling. We was like it was every day a show, the next day, the next show, the next party, the next good time, all that stuff. And you get caught up in that because, even though you're married and you got a family and you love your family, you're on the road and it seems very glamorous, but, you go in a building and there's, several thousand people there and you've got them on their feet and they're screaming and hollering, and then, you leave that, your adrenaline's running, and you go and you eat, and then you go back to an empty hotel room in a city you don't know, and your family's several thousand miles away, and you're sitting there watching TV, and that's how those things begin. And you go down to the bar, you have a beer, and then it turns into two, or you get hurt, and then you're taking pain pills, but you got to keep going, and so then that's how the addictions start, and it's just accountability. Making yourself accountable is probably one of the biggest things. And the other thing is, if you're genuinely a Christian, then again, genuine Christianity is not a religion; it's a relationship with Jesus Christ. And you have that relationship the same way you have it with anybody else. You spend time with Him, and you spend time with the Lord by being active and have an active prayer life. It's one of these. It's not that you go lock yourself in a room for hours, but I talk to God throughout the day. I wake up talking to God. I go to sleep talking to God at night. It's the first one I speak to in the morning, and the last one I speak to at night. And oftentimes, I join my wife now in prayer. But our prayer life is our way we speak to God, and God speaks to us through His Word. So the more of the Word that you have in you, the more of the Word's going to come out of you, and that's where you gain your strength. Jesus said, "The eye is the lamp of the body." If your eyes are good, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eyes are bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light within you is darkness, how great is the darkness? All of that means this. we are what we behold. In other words, what we're going to be is what we expose ourselves to every day. You know, if you can't drink, then stay out of the bar. You know, if you want to quit taking drugs, then get off the corner and get away from those guys that are doing that stuff and taking that stuff. You got to run from it, and so it's accountability. But the more you're in, the more that you read Scripture, and I'm not saying you got to pick up the Bible and read 3 or 4 chapters a day. I mean, it's like sometimes I read a verse. Sometimes I read, I will read a whole chapter. Or sometimes it's a paragraph. But it's like I do Bible studies, but it's just an ongoing relationship. And the greater that relationship is, then that's also going to help you be strong in hard times, if that makes sense. And and it's and like you said, there's been a lot of great changes in the business. The wellness policy is state of the art now, and that's great. A 4-day work week. I mean, basically a 4-day work week, 3 days off. But if you're one of the top guys, if you're a star, Vince is going to have you doing other things. You're not going to be off 3 days every week. John Cena. John Cena is a great guy. He's company man, hardworking, very personable. Probably done more Make-A-Wish Foundation appearances than anybody. But John Cena, and is also a very wealthy man now, but John Cena is also divorced. He's divorced, and I believe that he's dating one of the Bella twins now. But and I haven't talked to John. I don't know personally, but I've heard that he has no intention. He has no desire to get married, and he has no desire to have children. And if I was with a guy like that, I'd see you later, pal. Again, it's what are your priorities?
Well, thank you, Ted, for bringing a lot of clarity to that issue. A lot of the former wrestling stars that we've interviewed, a lot of guys, they come on the show, and we always want to make sure that they tell their story the right way, a representation of their former life, and their battles is deep, it's hard, and it's painful, but we want to make sure that story continues, because that battle is still going on today. Even a lot of it is more in the independent scene. We have a lot of guys and girls who goes to these schools, and they feel as they can drink beer or smoke weed or do a little or juice up, and they can just get to the WWE or get the Ring of Honor or get the TNA, and I'm gonna be fine because I got skill and I got this, and it's bad not only for yourself, but it's the action and the fact that the people who gonna be looking up to you, once they find that out, he's a drug user or he's an alcoholic and everything. We all got that in our families as is. So why would we want to praise somebody where we already know the end result? You know?
Exactly. You're right.
So I just wanted to find out and to piggyback one more time on my question. When a person comes to you when you're ministering, and they ask, of course, they interested in becoming wrestlers or they interested into the business. What advice do you give? And even some of our fans out here who's listening, who's big fans of Ted DiBiase, such as myself, what advice could you give them also to kind of piggyback off my first question?
Yeah. Well, it's very difficult for me now because the business that I grew up in isn't the business that wrestling is today, and so it's changed so very much. And in reality, it's much harder. It's much harder to become a star, and it's kind of like this. When you look at the number of young men that play football, they start off in the kid league football, then they go to high school, Well, you think about all the kids that play high school football, and out of that number, how many of them are selected and go on to college and play scholarship football in college? And then you take that number, and how many of those out of college get drafted into the NFL, and the number goes way down again. But when you look at wrestling, how many men and women actually make a great living wrestling? It's less than 200. I would say less than 100. Because there's only one place in the world. I say one place, the WWE. If you're not working for the WWE in wrestling, then the best you could be doing is making maybe a decent living. I'm not even sure about that anymore. I don't know if you can make a decent living in the indies. Like a lot of the guys and a lot of the kids that I see when I make appearances at those shows, they have a regular job, and wrestling's like, because they love wrestling, it's like a hobby. And of course, I know a lot of them would like to get to the big game. Today, number one, looks, your body and all that mean a lot more now than they did when I was coming up in it. Now it's like almost every guy you see, has got a great physique, and that's just something Vince McMahon likes. It's his company. Not everybody, obviously, but and if you're smaller, obviously, you need to even have a better appearance. You got to look the part. But the thing about wrestling is that it's sports entertainment. So being a great athlete is important. And nobody who wants to be a wrestler should ever think that because wrestling is show business that it's going to be easy. It's not easy at all. But for example, Kurt Angle. Kurt Angle's the first guy who was a legitimate gold medal winner in the Olympics who came into professional wrestling. But if Kurt Angle had come into wrestling and didn't have the ability to become a character and have charisma, he'd have never made any money. He wouldn't have lasted, because in this business you have to be both an entertainer and an athlete, and that's very important. And you got to know what they want, and you have to know how it's hard for me anymore because it's changed so much to give anybody. Of course, I tell kids when I do school assemblies all the time, go after your dream. Be the best you can be. But and again, I guess the advice that I would give any young person wanting to pursue wrestling is, if you're going to pursue it, obviously you have to have a place to start. And where the indie circuit is concerned, you need to get with a reputable crew. You need, if you're gonna pay somebody your money, and they tell you they're going to train you to be a wrestler, then you need to know what their credentials are. In other words, who trained you? What do you know, and do you have the ability? Do you have the capability and the connections to get me in front of the WWE at some point, so I can get that opportunity? Because if they don't have any of those things, then because there's a lot of people. There's a lot of it doesn't. I guess anybody can buy a ring and a promoter's license, but that doesn't make them a promoter or knowledgeable of wrestling, if you follow me.
That's true. It's true. And
thank you, Ted. Thank you very much, Ted.
Thank you for that. And speaking of getting into business, I know now, of course, everybody, around every corner is a wrestling school. You got indie guy, or you can train here, you can train here. But back in your day when you started in, talk about how tough it was for you even getting in. Of course, we know your father, the late great Ted DiBiase, you believe senior. I'm sorry, that wasn't your dad name. I apologize.
Mike DiBiase.
Iron Mike, yeah.
Iron Mike, yeah. I'm sorry. Iron Mike DiBiase, the late great. Your dad being in the business. Was it tough for you, Ted, getting in, or was it harder because you was in it?
Well, it was. Again, another misconception is, I think a lot of maybe fans would think that, if you grow up in the industry, there's some advantage to that, in that, I grew up and I had a natural feel for it because it was a part of my life every day. I watched my dad all the time. I was around it constantly. But now maybe the only break I had was, I had immediate access. In other words, because I grew up in it and I knew so many people. I mean, my dad died, in 1969, and so he wasn't alive. But I still, my main connection was the Funk family. But there were guys all over the country that I knew. But okay, maybe it was easier for me to get in, because back then there weren't a bunch of schools. I mean, there were these different promotions all over the country. And they different affiliations. Like they called them territories. And there was a promoter of each territory, and some of those territories would work together. Like there was a group in the NWA, National Wrestling Alliance, and then there was AWA, and there was a WWF, and so you had these different territories you could go to. But to get in the business, somebody had to take a liking to you. I mean, it wasn't like, okay, there was no door, there was nobody to call, there was no wrestling schools back then. Somebody had to like you, and if you showed interest and hung around long enough, and they'd say okay, or somebody saw that you had talent. There's a lot of football players that became wrestlers out of West Texas State where I went, and that was basically because of the influence of the Funk family. But there weren't any schools. But the way that I learned our business really doesn't exist anymore, and it's really kind of sad because there were these territories all over the country. Like when I started right here in the area where I live now. I went to work for Bill Watts, who was the owner of Mid-South Wrestling. And, I was on the opening match every night, but the guy across the ring was probably an 8-10-year veteran. And I might be on the opening match in some little podunk town, but I was in front of a live crowd. Every single night, I was in front of a live crowd. And I ask guys all the time now, I say, well, how long have you been wrestling? And they'll say, well, I've been wrestling 8 years or 5 years. I said, no, wait a minute. Maybe I should answer this question. How many matches have you had in 5 years? And a lot of times, if you add them up in the indies, the only opportunity they have is on a weekend, and maybe once or maybe twice on a weekend. So even if they wrestled 2 days every weekend, that's 8 matches a month. And in 10 months that's 80 matches, and in 12 months, it's right at just a little over 100 matches. Mm-hmm. Well, I wrestled 7 days a week. I wrestled 30. There were 31 days. There's 365 days in a year. I guarantee you that 300 of those days I was wrestling, and so it was on the job training. You were in the ring, and I would watch other guys wrestle. I would watch the top guys, and I would study those guys, and I would listen to their interviews, and I was a student of my business that way. And and then you'd see a move that some guy did, and wow, you like that, and you have a match and you try it, and then you would pick this and pick that, and then over a course of time you had the opportunity to develop your own character and your own style. And so, like by the time I went to the WWF in 1987 and became the $1 Million Man character, I had already been wrestling 12 years. And really the reason that $1 Million Man character I was chosen for it was because of the way I already carried myself as a heel. As a heel, I would talk down to the crowd and, very cocky and arrogant, and I would talk real big. And of course, the best kind of heel was what we label the excuse the expression, but chicken shit heel. The guy who he talks real big, but when he's confronted, he becomes a coward. He's a bully. That's what bullies are. Bullies are cowards. You know, they pick on people smaller than they are, or they run in packs. And you know, they talk real big, and then when you confront them, they you know, and you never get tired of seeing that guy get beat. So that's the type of heel that I became. But all of that was back in an era when, you know, like today, most of the guys I know in the indie circuits, you know, when they sit down and go over a match, they go over the whole match. I mean, they go over the match bell to bell. The only thing I knew when I walked in the ring was exactly how it was going to end, the finish. Everything else was ad-libbed. Everything else was done on the fly. And when you learn to do that over a course of time, it's an acquired skill because you learn to listen to the people. And every crowd you wrestle in front of is not going to react the same way. A lot of people think, well, they would, but they don't. And when they don't act the way you expect them to or you want them to, then you got to think on your feet and go, wow, what do we need to do here? How can we shift gears to get these people into the match? And so that just comes with time. And unfortunately, today, the young guys getting in the business don't have that opportunity because they go to a school. And you know, as much as they love wrestling, the only opportunity they have to wrestle is on weekends. And if they're fortunate, you know, they might be able to wrestle, you know, maybe 4 times a month. But so it's hard. It's a lot harder for guys now. Now we recruit guys and based on their look and an appeal, and you know, they go down to ultimately, if they're going to get in the WWE, they end up in the developmental program down in Orlando, and that's a pretty good program now. They've got that going pretty good, but still, as good as it is, you know, nothing beats experience, and it just the way by which my generation and the generations preceding me learned the business, it just, you know, it did, you know, after, say, I would say Triple H, his generation, which he was like he was right after me. He and Shawn Michaels and those guys, they were probably the last group of guys that learned the trade the way that we did. If that makes sense to you.
It does.
Okay.
It does.
Yeah, yes, it does.
And you know, like you said, you can look at matches from back then and even now. Even back, you know, I watched the match earlier, I believe, well, on YouTube, it said Hogan's debut. It was you versus Hogan, I believe it was in 78 or 79. And even watching the matches from the 70s and 80s, and then you get to the 90s and the millennium, it's a different style, you can just tell. And a lot of people, when we go to a lot of shows, of course, backstage, you watch a lot of local guys, they go over matches for like 3 hours and they wrestle for 20 minutes and they doing flips backstage and cartwheels and right stuff down on pads. And then when we see a lot of the legends, such as yourself and others, they just chilling. They within the match. You know, they'll talk and laugh with us, talk laugh with the boys, and they'll go out and they'll have a great match. And they'll just talk about the ending. And we've even told and been involved in angles with some legends and known wrestlers, the way we've been with them with endings. And I said, all right, this is the ending. This is what I want you to do, man. That's it. The end. It was no, okay, start the match, you go ahead, you punch, I punch, you do a sunset flip, and you back up, and you take a powder. And we see that all the time. Speaking of indie matches, if independent shows, if it's okay to bring this up, you were synonymous, or I should say that person was known for being with you by the name of Virgil. Let you know, we recently saw Virgil, I believe it was last month, and me and my work is for our company, and we talked to Virgil. Virgil asked us about coming on to the show, and Virgil mentioned these words. Virgil wanted us to pay him, and I quote, said, and NSC Gameboy is a witness, and we had witnesses, $15,000 to have him on our show. And when he told us this, it was like, you know, we just laughed it off, said no problem. And he was dead serious. Also, to add to the fact that the promoter, that I'm not going to mention name, and a lot of other known promoters that's been on TV, mentioned to us before that Virgil doesn't, isn't really invited to shows. He just shows up, sets up a table, has your name on it, by the way, Mr. DiBiase.
Right.
Your
Right.
name is spelled wrong, by the way, and tries to sell pictures. So we, wanted to ask you, and a lot of fans are Facebooking us now wanting to know your thoughts of Virgil and your thoughts of his state, because he's now getting notoriously known, more so besides just being with you in WWF, but mainly as Lonely Virgil and trying to use your name to get some kind of profit.
Well, it's really a sad story. The years when he was with me, we got along fine. There was never any problem. But basically, and I don't want this to sound wrong either. Basically, it's because at least Virgil understood where his bread was buttered, and
right.
he did what he was asked to do. He was always on time. And again, here's a guy. He didn't drink. He didn't smoke. He didn't do drugs. And I don't know this except by hearing it from other guys. But then some people have said that I guess his vice would be gambling. That he likes to gamble a lot. So I don't know, but the nicest way to say it is, and I'm not sure Virgil's elevator goes to the top floor. He's not the brightest guy in the world, and he just now and again, I've done autograph signings with him, but then it's when I'm not there, when I'm around, I guess he's on his best behavior. Because quite frankly, he knows I'm not gonna put up with any, nonsense. But I've just had other people tell me stories like you guys are about him. Like, for example, like somebody going by the table and, hey, you want a picture, da da da, and they go, oh yeah, sure. And so he says, what's your name, and they give him the name, and so he writes their name on it, and best wishes, Virgil, and then says $20. He asked them if they wanted a picture, and then he'll wait until he signs it, and then run him up for $20. And so like it's almost like a carnival barker. It's like and he's just over the last few years developed a bad reputation. And I mean, and personally, I have two websites, and it came to my attention that like a couple of promoters that had booked me for different things would call me and they say, hey, we got a call from Virgil and he's wanting to come. And I went, what? Well, and then I had to make a call to him and say, look, I said, I don't want to hear this anymore. I said, if it's something I think that where I think you fit, then I'll let you know, or call me and ask me. And again, if I think that it will work for both of us, great. But I don't want to get any more calls from promoters, And it's just, he was doing things, behind people's back. Well, and like you said, and I don't, I could make a big deal about it if I wanted to, but I don't want to make a big deal of it. I mean, I know the guy's got to make a living, and I wish him well. But I mean, like every poster he has both of our pictures on it, both of our names on it, and most of the pictures on his table have both of us in it, and so, as long as he doesn't, as long as he doesn't, lie, that's the thing. As long as he doesn't lie to a promoter, and there was one instance where somebody said that he had actually called as if representing both of us. This is a long time ago, like to like a Comic-Con or something. And so they said, yeah, sure, we'll bring you in. And so, a week or two out, he calls him back and says, something's come up for Ted. He's not going to be able to make it, but I'll still be there.
Wow.
And I never was booked there, and I never had any knowledge of it. So anyway, I've had that conversation with him personally, so that hasn't happened anymore. So, it's sad, but Virgil has basically shot himself in the foot, and it's just sad. I don't know what else to say about it.
Well, let me chime in real quick, Tech. I just want to say, Ted, because I spoke to Virgil most of that time in this story, and the first thing I asked him when he said this was he smoking crack? Because I never heard of someone paying $15,000 for an interview, and
right.
you're not. I can see Hulk Hogan, Ric Flair, Shawn Michaels, Undertaker. I can see people whose names resonated. The Rock, Stone Cold Steve Austin, people that oh hey, I know him. I've seen him on TV. I've seen his movies and stuff. And listening to you and knowing this, I want the fans and promoters that listen to Under the Mat and hearing this episode and hearing the archives to know if you're doing work with him and he uses this technique or this trick to make sure that you get the information correct, because like you said, we don't want to mention the promoter name. It's a big promotion here in the East Coast that had it in, we consider ourselves a real wrestling show. And we get to excuse my language, we get to the real shit. And, we don't want to misrepresent anybody and say, well, I heard on the show that, no, we don't play those games, I want to make sure, Tech wanted to make sure, and Shin, our correspondent, wanted to make sure that we got to the bottom of this, and whatnot. The best way to go is with the man himself. So we're glad that we got you on to elaborate and bring a lot of clarity, because I think he needs help. I really do.
Oh,
Speaking to him face to face.
Brother, I couldn't agree with you more. I think he needs help too. And I've witnessed him in terms of my faith and everything, and he's always been, to his credit, he's always been polite and he's always listened. He's never really responded, and and I think, if in fact, and again, I don't want to, it's a bunch of hearsay, but just different guys in the business have told me that he gambles a lot, and I don't know that personally. I never saw him. He never talked to me about it. But if but I do know this. He didn't. He doesn't have the other vices. He doesn't do drugs. He doesn't. And he always took pretty good care of his body. So. But nonetheless, I do believe he's got a problem. I mean, I walked out of JFK Airport. Oh my gosh, this was months ago, maybe a year ago, and TMZ was there. And put a camera on my face, and basically they were trying to, I guess, kind of coax me into saying something negative about Virgil, and and I'm not going to, I'm just not going to go there. The guy was, a part of my gimmick for a while, and while he was there, he did everything he was asked to do, and I never had any problems with him. The problems came later, and I don't know. I think sometimes people may do things out of desperation. I don't know if that's where he's at, but it is. Some of the things that he says, and the exaggerations. There's a lot of other exaggerations that I've heard as well. So it's just sad. And I personally, if you're out there and you're a believer as I am, pray for him. Because I do think he needs help of some kind. I know that he's never been married, and I thought that I think he lived at home alone, I guess, with his mom. I think his mom has passed away. So I don't know that situation. I don't know if he inherited the house and that's where he lives and he lives alone. I don't know any of that stuff. And sometimes the stories, or sometimes you just don't know what to believe, quite frankly. So I would just say pray for the guy.
Yeah, and all you did was, as it says in Word of God, you planted the seed and you witnessed to Virgil or Mike, and that's all you could do. Your work was done, and hopefully, in any case, he does seek help for whatever his vices is, and for him trying to work people. Shin-Blade, real quick. I know our correspondent had a quick question. I know time is a little low.
Well, I have to say it's pretty amazing, Ted, that you have came up with all these truths, because it's a difference between bashing someone and telling the truth. Now,
right.
There's another thing that we have never talked about, but time is getting short. But your son, Ted DiBiase Jr., has a documentary, and I have seen the trailer to it. Can you tell us, in about 5 minutes or less, the workings of your upcoming documentary?
Yes, and thanks for asking. You know, the documentary, originally, the guy that's doing the documentaries, his name is Pete Fierro, and you know, it's kind of a funny story. Pete came. This was several years ago, and he was coming to interview me as a favor to a friend, to do what, you know, like they call a shoot interview. And
right.
So he sets up, and he was filming the shoot interview, and he's asking me these different questions. Well, when you start asking me questions about my personal life, I'm going to start telling you about Jesus, what Jesus has done in my life. And so what I didn't know at the time was that Pete's dad was a minister, and at the time Pete was kind of backslidden. And when I shared my story, you know, it was very convicting to him, and he did a personal turnaround, and that was what initially, you know, got him in the mindset to do this documentary. It's the first one he's ever done. What Pete does for a living, he does weddings. He does a lot of, you know, he does pictures and video for weddings. And but the way my son got involved in this was that it was kind of like, it was like to put a twist on it. Like we've seen documentaries before, but as opposed to just telling my story in a documentary, you know, to tell it through the eyes of my son, which would be different. And so that's where it went. And there's a lot of great stuff. And what we were waiting for, we thought we were going to be able to get some footage from the WWE. And we waited, and you know, and then it was like, you know, we're waiting for people to call us back, and it doesn't happen. And finally when we get word, it was like, well, you know, that the WWE, I guess, decided that they didn't necessarily want to be a part of the documentary. And you know, I was kind of surprised, but you know, the only thing that I would guess is this, you know, like, the title of it is The Price of Fame. So basically, through my story, I'm going to paint a picture of the price of fame. In other words, you know, it's not what it's all made out to be. And the only thing I can think is that maybe the WWE, you know, doesn't see that it's going to, I don't think they see it as a positive message for them. And I don't know why. But, you know what, you know, I still have a great relationship with the company. I'm very thankful to the company, but the reason that this thing has taken so long is because we were waiting on this footage that we thought we were going to get, and now we're not going to get. So I think that you know, I would say easily in the next, you know, 4 or 5, you know, or 2 or 3 months, you know, this thing should be out. But I really appreciate you guys asking, because I'd like to get that word out.
No problem. I would say, hopefully, Ted, we could have you back on our show soon for part 2. We could have you on earlier. We could dedicate the whole episode for you so we can talk about your great career, even pre-WWF, talk about your work in the business coming up, WWF, and even afterwards. So thank you much for your time, Ted. Anything you want to go ahead and plug, your company, your business, or how to contact you?
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, I appreciate it, guys. Thanks for the time and giving me the time. And you know, there's basically, I have 2 websites, milliondollarman.com, and the ministry site is called heartofdavidministry.com. And for anybody that's interested in booking me for an event or a ministry opportunity to speak at a church or to any other type of event, there's a form on the websites that you can fill out. You know, you fill in your information, and it'll be submitted. And then I've got a guy that helps me do all the computer stuff, and we'll go through all the you know, that's how you can find me though. Those 2 websites. And again, what I'm doing and where I am is usually posted on the websites, on the calendar. And again, you guys are in Baltimore, and I'll be flying into BWI on Saturday, and Saturday night I'll be at the show in Joppa, and then Sunday morning I'll be speaking at a church in Virginia. Okay, let me see here if I can remember. Winchester, Virginia. It's called What's Up. What's Up Worship. That's a different name.
Yeah, it is.
But the guy there, the pastor there, is a very, very good personal friend of mine, and so that's where I'll be this coming weekend. And guys, I appreciate the time. Thank you much, and I'll be happy to come back on your show in the future.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate it.
Greatly appreciate it.
Thank you.
You bet.
Take care
God
of
bless.
yourself, man.
Everybody, that was the great $1 Million Man, DiBiase. We got 10 seconds ago. Thank everybody for calling in. Thank you, Anton Moore Lewis, for calling in, for your music and your love for wrestling. Thank you, $1 Million Man, DiBiase. And the Mat Radio, live with AMCW this Saturday. Talk to y'all next week.
Meet your local Organic Valley farmer at our Farm Discovery on Saturday, October 10th. You're invited for a day of family fun on the farm in Jefferson, Maryland. Meet the Holters, one of the 492 Organic Valley farming families here in the Northeast. Join us for a farm tour, meet the cows, make some butter, and enjoy a tasty organic picnic. Reserve your Farm Discovery spot for free today at organicvalley.coop and join us from 10 to 3 on Saturday, October 10th. Organic Valley, bringing the good.